Hello, everybody, and welcome to our next session of Taking Nature Black today, Environmental Justice in DC and Beyond. I'm Eliza Cava, the Director of Conservation at Nature Forward, and I also have the privilege of serving as the Naturally Latinos Conference co-chair, the sister conference to Taking Nature Black. And I'm thrilled today to introduce this session. This session will be about our partners. So these are folks that Nature Forward has had the pleasure and the privilege of working with for the last 4 or 5 years now in DC and around the region on a wide variety of things, from working with Brenda and Ab really deeply on some issues around Oxon Run Park and east of the river, environmental justice and conservation issues in DC, to Queen's involvement in the Taking Nature Black planning over past times, and we're thrilled to have her back as a speaker this time. And we've been longtime members of collaboratives and partnerships, including the Virginia Environmental Justice Collaborative with all of them. So I'm going to briefly introduce the speakers and then turn it over to Jamoni, who is our moderator for today. So Ms. Brenda Lee Richardson is currently working as coordinator of APAC, the Anacostia Park and Communities Collaborative. She is a longtime organizer for social and environmental justice in Ward 8, including work way back beginning in the Marion Barry administration, and has, along with Ab, was a co-founder of Friends of Oxon Run Park. But she does so much more. She pops up everywhere, and she is an eco-feminist and an educator and really fabulous with children. So thank you, Ms. Brenda, for joining us today. I'll turn next to Ab, her longtime partner in crime. Ab Jordan Jr. Has served as, among many other things, an ANC commissioner in the Congress Heights neighborhood of the Great Ward 8 in Washington, D.C. for many years. Also co-founder and current chair of Friends of Oxon Run Park. Has been very involved on all sorts of community-based issues right there in that neighborhood. And we get to work with him on our Ward 8 Water Watchers project, along with the Green Scheme and the well at Oxon Run, the project of DC Greens there. So we're really pleased to be able to work with Ab and benefit from his deep history in the neighborhood. And if you ever get to hear him wax on about the beauty of Oxon Run Park, which you can see on our website at our Story of Streams project, it's just a real joy to watch. And Ms. Queen Shabazz is the parent of a lead-poisoned child, and therefore the founder of United Parents Against Lead, based in Richmond. She has for a long time served as coordinator of the Virginia Environmental Justice Collaborative and has been involved for over 26 years in environmental justice work in the state of Virginia and beyond. She's been a participant or served on a planning committee for the Taking Nature Black conference for a number of years. And we are so excited to have you all here to talk about your work and your history. Finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce Jamoni Overby, who made sure to ask me to point out that on this International Women's Day, our panel is composed of majority women, and of course, Black women. Ab, don't worry, we love you too. Jamoni is our DC conservation advocate. She's been working with us for a year and a half. She has a background in environmental justice and food justice in particular. And her work in DC really focuses on climate change issues, especially as they affect low-income communities and households. And she also works on our access to green space issues and our Ward 8 Water Watchers project, among many other things. I won't tell you what we talk about in our weekly check-ins, it's too much. So thank you all again. We're just so pleased to have you, and enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Eliza, for those amazing introductions. And I would just want to first say thank you, all three of you, for being here today and being a part of this conversation. One of our partners, Jaron Hill Lockridge, always says that we stand on the shoulders of giants, and you all are exactly that, being here today. And so I'm so excited to be able to learn about your journeys and your experiences. And let's just hop right in. So just to start out, I want to kind of set the tone with the conference, since we are talking about belonging and what it means to us and how it impacts our work and our communities. So my first question for all three of you is, what does belonging mean to you as we are gathered here today? And what has belonging meant to you, and how has that changed over the course of your work? And you all can just speak freely, honestly, and then we can, if it's like some dispute, I'll just call on somebody.
Well, I'll go first. I think that belonging to me means that the land and the water is ours too. I think a lot of times that when folks look at nature, green space, and our waterways, those of us that live in disfavored communities are so caught up in our collective trauma that we don't recognize that the land where we find nature and the water where we find our rivers and our streams are a part of who we are as well. So I'm very, very grateful that that gives me a sense of belonging and connection to my own environment, no matter where I live.
For me, belonging is, first of all, I'm Black, and that's obvious. The next thing I'm looking at is I have to agree with what Brenda says. That's ownership of my community, ownership of the resources that exist in my community. That is the land, that's the green space that exists in my community. And in terms of how do I manifest the belonging, or what I sense as belonging, is first through education, to prepare myself so that I will understand what it means to own. The next is engagement with people in my community, so that I can help to educate them, and we can share knowledge as well. And the last part is empowerment. You know, you can't really belong if you're not empowered to make the kind of changes or differences that are necessary. So that's what belonging means to me.
Yes, I agree with Sister Brenda and Brother Absalom. To me, belonging means the freedom to be, to exist as a Black woman of African descent. We've always been tied to the land, as farmers, as agriculturalists. We've always belonged and saw the value of our connection with nature. So to see and today when you have people threatening that or calling up because a Black person is watching a bird, or in a park or attempting to go swim, and we've had the separation of beaches and and things that we've had to create so that we can carve out a space to say that we belong. So I'm very excited to be a part of the Belonging book that was done by Caroline, and I would invite everyone to get a copy of it, or to view it online, because it really re-emphasizes what we're saying today, that we have always belonged and we will continue to belong.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. I was also had the honor to be a part of the Belonging book, and just first of all, going through that experience and being in a place where you are familiar with and you love, and kind of being able to show other people the beauty of, our own parks and our own neighborhoods, one, and for two, just being very much at peace there. And I just wanted to share a little excerpt from my belonging piece that kind of coincides with what you just shared, Ms. Shabazz. It says, emphasizing Black people in nature is a reminder of our historic, generations-long connection to the environment. Farming, healing, sustainability, and conservation are rooted in every Black American's ancestry and experiences. As we make decisions about land use, we need to remember everyone who might possibly be affected and make way for them at the table. And Blackness is peaceful, serene, and beautiful, and deserving of free movement like every other one of God's creatures. When you see us, you're experiencing nothing more natural. So I thank you all for sharing what belonging means to you. That's exactly what it means to me. Now, going more into environmental justice in DC and in Virginia, I wanted to ask you and learn about what started your journey towards environmental activism. Was it one thing that kind of stuck out to you? Did it come about from your love of being outside? What was it that really sparked that interest for you all?
Well, for me, I think I've shared with you before, but I'll share with those who are here today with us. Even though I grew up in the city, I grew up next to a 600-acre farm. So within a half a block of my home was cows and chickens and corn growing and alfalfa hay growing. And that automatically gave you a connection. Plus, my mother came from Tennessee, a place called Shelbyville, Tennessee. So she was always reminding us of her roots. Then you know, like we were always going to Rock Creek Park, which we would walk to as kids. When I moved out to Ward 8, I moved around the corner from Oxon Run Park onto Congress Street. And my home is on Savannah Street. That's where I moved when I bought a house. So the point is, I've always been connected in some ways with land.
Mhm.
Now, to be honest with you, I wasn't aware that I was an environmentalist until I met up with Brenda Richardson. And she got me interested in terms of understanding what it meant to be an environmentalist and what it meant to commit yourself to saving the environment. Sure, I had enjoyed the environment over the years, enjoyed it, celebrated it in some respects, but I never appreciated it to the point where I wanted to make certain that we would take the steps that were necessary to ensure that it would continue to exist for not only the generation that we have, but generations in the future.
Thank you. We think we're so grateful for how we are able to impact each other once we meet each other and connect. So thank you, Ms. Brenda, for pulling that out of Ab. What kind of sparks your interest as you are the influencer of all things environmental justice in the DC?
That's
Oh,
right.
thank you, Jamoni. So I think it was 30 years ago, my friend Caitlin, who is white, is the first ecofeminist that I ever met. And she started taking me to these environmental communities because I was like, well, why is it that when you guys come over, it's always people who don't look like me? So I went to a couple of meetings and I just remember asking myself, where are the Black people? And then I discovered that it was quite violent in the district back then. And I discovered that folks were struggling to keep food on their table and roofs over their heads and trying to be safe on our streets. And so I was like, well, somebody's got to be paying attention to this environmental stuff on behalf of our community. And so that's how I got involved in it. And I've been involved in it ever since. And I will also say that I was just amazed that I would cross that bridge every day, either the 11th Street Bridge, which is what it was called back then, or the Frederick Douglass Bridge, and never noticed the river. I just never noticed it until I plugged in to Caitlin and got more involved in the environment. And now I pay attention.
Thank you so
Yes.
much.
And as for myself, yes, thank you, Jamoni. What got me started is my son was poisoned back in 1996, poisoned by lead. And as Eliza said at the beginning of the program, my organization that was founded as a result of his poison, the United Parents Against Lead, we're actually beyond the borders of Virginia. We are a national organization that started with one Black woman in Chicago whose 2 daughters were poisoned just from renovating. So due to the history of greenlining that has forced us to even to this day to live in substandard housing, where my son was poisoned, from lead-based paint, peeling paint, from painting the soil outside in our backyard. So the environmental racism that still exists with that causes whatever zip code you live in to put you more at risk for environmental hazards. And so that's what really got me pushed into the environmental justice movement, the disparity of the hazards that we find in environmental justice communities, frontline communities, fence line communities, sacrifice zone communities that we are unfortunately still living with today.
Can I just respond to something that Brenda mentioned, Jamoni?
Yeah, of course.
She related to the fact about 30 years ago when she didn't see Black folks in numbers in the groups that she was attending. But that's my experience today, unfortunately.
Mm,
And that's one of the challenges that we have to meet, because I'm on a lot of Zoom meetings and what have you, other kind of meetings, too, but Zoom meetings and Google meetings and what have you with folks. But I don't see many Black people there, and there has to be a reason for that. And so there's a challenge that exists that we can't just rely upon the folks who are in these positions of power and influence to help us. We're going to have to do some things ourselves to ensure that we are gain access to those avenues and positions of power and influence, to those networks that make decisions about who gets resources or doesn't. And that's something we're going to have to do. But again, like I say, I see it today. It's unfortunate that it exists, but that's why we have to commit ourselves to working to change it.
so
Absolutely.
Jamoni, can I share?
Yes, of
You
course.
got us started. So Queen, if you got something else, jump in.
No, yes, I mean, I definitely agree with Mr. Ab is saying, absolutely. And I think this is a perfect time for you to kind of share some of those challenges that you all have experienced. But first, I think it would be great for you all to speak to how you get community members engaged in your work as Black leaders in your communities, in the faces of your organizations. We can start then, and Ms. Brenda, you'd be happy to share some of the great things, and then we're going to lead into the challenges for sure.
Well, I just wanted to piggyback on what Ab said, and this focuses more on the challenges, but I have to say it while I remember.
Yes, fine.
It's exhausting being Black. It's just absolutely exhausting. And I just recently learned a new term, race fatigue. And if there was just an appreciation of who I am as a human being, and not having to be more competitive or more this or more that, but just accepting me for who I am, I think you'd see many, many more of us at the table. But we've got to work harder for the jobs. We've got to work harder to keep food on the table. We have to work harder in our schools. And at some point, you're just like, I can't take it anymore. So why should I? Yes, enough is enough, Queen. You are absolutely right. And why should we continue to be oppressed as a people when we are exhausted? I mean, and there's beauty in being Black. I so know that there's beauty in being Black, but I also think that we have to be realistic and understand why it's so exhausting. And I think that folks, we have to dig deeper when it comes to looking at why Black folks aren't at the table, because this collective trauma stuff is real. We're dodging bullets. I know Ab and I are. Queen, I don't know about you, but we're trying to stay alive and be safe. And then you want us to come sit at a table and be, oh, everything is so fine when it's not.
Yeah, I would, I'm gonna let Ms. Shabazz respond, but when you first kind of spoke to what started your activism, focusing on environmentalism, you first mentioned a plethora of issues that impact the Black community, impact our community. And the focus of my work, especially since being with Nature Forward, has definitely been the intersectionality between all of those pieces. There's so much that does impact our communities, and it is important for us to recognize the economic and the housing issues, but also have as those relate to environmental justice. And I think the intersectionality of those issues and us being able to talk about it will first make impact, but as you said, bringing more people to the table. As myself, I'm on those same meetings with you all, and it's a few of us, and I definitely understand that we come with so many differences and so many more things that impact us that I don't think a lot of people understand. So I thank you for highlighting that, and I'm going to let Ms. Shabazz answer.
Yes, I certainly agree with everything that's been said. It being Black can be exhausting, and it's the same time to me it's exhilarating, and I wouldn't want to be anything else. I think as you said, Sister Brenda, we are living with the issues, with the hazards on a daily basis. So just that we're always in that survival mode, where those that may not be living in our communities have the leisure, the time to to address other things, because they're not under that constant threat as we are. So even with lead poisoning, and when we started talking to parents of lead poisoning children and asking them, to make this a priority, but there are so many other priorities, just for single working mothers that have to provide the food, the clothing, the shelter, and with lead poisoning, your child is not bleeding or broken, so you may not see that as a priority until you start seeing the effects, educationally. So I think since we are living in those zip codes, we are already living with the issues. So we are, that's where you organize from. I started first organizing with parents who were like myself, had children that were poisoned by lead and we're not getting any assistance. So what we mobilized to say, what do we need to do first for our children to protect our families, and then for the greater community. So that's where the organizing piece came in. But certainly being at the table, we are no longer asking for a seat at the table. We are creating our own tables. We are bringing out our own chairs, so or the table itself, and setting up those platforms and avenues ourselves, because we can't wait for someone else to save us.
Absolutely.
Jamoni, there are two things. One is, Brenda just made me think about the Dr. Joy DeGruy, who has an idea about post-traumatic slave syndrome.
Mhm.
But Brenda, I would raise the question, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, is she just talked about race fatigue. But the other day, my brother and I were going through some kind of discussion. And so I went to the dictionary on the internet to look up race, and it's ambiguous now. And so how can you say that you have fatigue when we don't define race, in a sense, And that's something as Black people, we're going to have to come to grips with, is that, there are people who are saying race is a social construct and it's not scientific. There are a whole lot of ways to argue against it. I'm Black, so I mean, that's my race, if you want to put it that way. And I know what we've experienced. And I think Brenda is correct that there's so many things. You don't think about that at times when we're fighting out in the community to have people engaged at my apartment complex where I live, trying to get people out to deal with the environment, or trying to get them out for any kind of issue that impacts on our community. And they don't come at times. And so you're going to segue into a discussion about how we get people out, because that's one of the challenges we have. And I guess, Brenda, you're right. Fatigue of the struggle, that what we have, the oppression and the exploitation that we experience, just because we Black, as the last poet said, just because you Black, that oppression and exploitation has an impact upon us. And it's reflected then in our inability to address certain things in our community. I thank you, Brenda, for making me think about that. I hadn't thought about it.
Right. And the fact that the resources are continuously diverted away from us. So I'm all for
Amen.
community control funds. First of all,
Yes.
we got to be the majority, the one who's suffering the problem, and we should be getting the majority of the funds to address and remediate the problem.
Amen.
So community control funds.
That's called equity, sister.
Yes, sir, Brother Absalom.
While we're on this topic, I would love to kind of include this question from the audience. And it asks, how can non-Black allies make a non-Black space welcoming? How can the first Black person take some space of their own and take control?
Good question.
That is a good question.
Yeah.
Well, I think for me, when I look at the challenges we have in our community, air quality, NASA did a research study, and I didn't believe this until I saw it. And Ward 8 has the worst air quality in the region. However, air quality monitoring stations are located on the other side of the river, and we're still waiting for ours. So, you know, what does that say? It says that it's okay to build a highway in poor, dispirited communities, and nobody's going to say anything because they don't have a voice. So what is it that non-Black folks can do? Be at the table to help us stop them from doing that. And the other thing I think about is the heat islands. I've discovered that there's a direct correlation between heat sensitivity and violence. And then you're wondering, why are Black folks standing outside? Because they don't have any air conditioning in their units. So what happens when you get hot and you have idle time? Bad things happen. So what can people who are not people of color do? Help us plant more trees. Help us have more constructive outdoor activity for our community so we can be at peace. I think when we talk about environmental justice and our challenges, that's the biggest thing that I long for, peace. Just peace, and not dumping on our communities because we're poor and because we're Black. We have dignity, we have integrity, and we deserve to be treated with respect, whether we're Black, white, green, yellow, or whatever. We deserve dignity.
Absolutely. Did Ab or Ms.
Yeah.
Shabazz want to
Well,
also?
Sister Shabazz, I'd like to hear what she's got to say, but
Yes, but as far as that, taking that space, or carving out space, taking control, I've already mentioned the community control funds, but one thing I would like to share, and I would have to find the link and I'll give it to Jamoni and Eliza, but what you mentioned, sister, about the air quality in the ward. The EPA just launched a program this Monday, March 6th, where they're loaning air sensors to communities. So there's an application, just like a one-page application to request. I think you can get up to 10 of them, and then you can have them placed strategically in those areas that you would like to monitor. So I will find that link and share it. But programs like that we need to be in tune with, with governmental entities, those that have the resources, those that have the funding, and we need to tap into that as much as we can, and without it going through someone else's hands and them doling it out, and oftentimes it never reaches our communities. So again, the community control funds, those who are in the community having decision-making powers over how the resources are allocated. And that starts with us, and saying that we're not going to wait for someone else to do it. And although it can be very tiring, again, that fatigue, it has to be like, I guess what Tracy Chapman said, who if not us, then who? So until those resources come, that we can pass the baton. I've been doing this for 26 years and hoping that we would be able to say that lead poisoning is a thing of the past, but unfortunately it's not. Now we're dealing with, lead in our water sources. Everybody familiar with Flint, Michigan. So we want to get those lead service lines replaced with all the old infrastructure in DC and Virginia and all of our major cities. So replacing those lead service lines, and we need to make sure that there's equity in how those dollars are allocated and whose lead service lines get replaced first, so we don't have another Flint, Michigan, and thousands of our children being poisoned and being considered as expendable.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with both of you.
hold on.
Oh, go.
I'm not going to miss the opportunity. First of all, let me just say one thing. Racism is not a Black problem. We didn't create it. It's a problem that only white people can solve.
Right.
So my concern is that when someone says they are non-Black and they want to assist us or help us in overcoming the barriers that exist, then I would say that there's some things that they can clearly do. First of all, folks can speak out against white privilege. Brenda had if we can go back, Brenda had a group of folks once that were meeting to discuss the question of race. How do we come together around this issue? And my pastor and I, James Coates, went to her meeting and we raised a question about white privilege, and the meeting stopped. Am I correct, Brenda?
Yeah.
Because when confronted with this issue, white folks don't want to deal with it. So they have, just like we have courage to stand up against those forces that are arraigned against Black people in terms of our advancement and our very survival, those allies, those non-white allies are going to have to start doing the same thing. And they're going to have to start standing up saying that, one, we are anti-racist, that we want the changes to be made. Because, you know, there's so many things. Well, first of all, we've got to get a definition of racism that's a universal truth. And like I say, when I look at the dictionary, they don't have any. But I could give you a definition now, but we need to define racism in terms of universal truth so that people will have something to use as a weapon against it. And that's the first thing I think that can happen. And let me share something else, because Brenda mentioned about EPA, and Sister Shabazz also mentioned dog feces by EPA standards is a hazardous material. Yet and still, people are insisting that you bring a dog park in the Oxon Run Park close to a stream where the Department of Environment and Energy and Environment had done, they call it an advisory report, saying that you shouldn't have it in the park. There should be no dog. What I'm saying is, I hate to put it this way, but for Black folks, well, most Black folks, let's put it this way, dog parks weren't a central issue, weren't an issue. It seems like it's something that's being imposed upon our community. Yeah. And so when we're looking for allies, the first person is a non-Black saying, well, how can I help you? You can stand up with us when we're fighting against a dog park, and saying from an environmental perspective, dog feces is a hazardous material as defined by EPA. Now, what does the city do? The city comes up with its own environmental standards that don't take into consideration what the EPA says. So they say, yeah, we're approving this park because it meets our environmental goals, but it doesn't meet the EPA environmental goals. Why would they do this? Because they know in the Black community we're powerless to challenge them in court.
Yeah.
We are powerless to say that because you want to do this, okay, and you're going to go ahead and do it, but we have the legal means to challenge. So again, we need resources from our non-Black folks to do this. Now, the other thing you raise a question is about what can Black people do? And the thing is that we're just going to have to educate ourselves and prepare ourselves for struggle, you know. And sometimes Brenda, I think, is right. We're so distraught,
yeah,
you know, so tired. Another struggle is difficult, but we're going to have to start telling people that, as Frederick Douglass said, without a struggle, there's no progress, you know. And by the way, we don't go back and listen to our elders from time to time. You know, Frederick Douglass says society is so constituted that it cannot honor a helpless man, though it may pity him. And even this it cannot do for long if signs of power do not arise. So we're going to have to start demonstrating power. And what is power? Power is the ability to get somebody to do something that they normally wouldn't be doing.
Absolutely. I can listen to you all talk all day, for sure, about this topic in particular. But just to briefly summarize, it sounds like our allies need to be a lot more intentional about the work that we want in our community, and the environmental justice and impact that we want in our communities. And us as Black people in our community need to continue to be engaged and continue to learn about what is best for our community and what best suits us to be able to advocate on behalf of what we want and what we need. Absolutely. I'm
I think
gonna,
there needs to be a declaration from white folks who are our allies that we are non-racist. We're going to give up white privilege.
yeah. I'm gonna move on to the next question into it sounds like we kind of talked about some of our obstacles already. I would love to speak more to some of the victories that have kept you motivated over these years, and we can also speak to some of those community events that you have enjoyed putting on and having in your communities, because those are also victories, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I love the Ward 8 Water Watchers events. I love coming to any APAC events and just being immersed in the community. And those feel like victories whenever I'm able to engage, grow community and build community, which is so, so important for the work we do. I honestly believe it's the foundation of that work that has gone back so many years that we continue to have in community building.
Well, I'm so grateful to Ab and his vision for the Friends of Oxon Run Park.
It's our
Because
vision. It's our vision.
thank you, Mr. Jordan. But he's a very powerful man with such incredible insight. And I will share that it was during the pandemic when we couldn't go anywhere, that Mayor Bowser in the District of Columbia said the only place you can go and be safe is the park. And as a result of that, Ab and I were able to have all these incredible events in the park with our children, because we came up with something called trauma breaks during the pandemic. And if we have time, I'd just like to show you a few of those pictures, and special thanks to Ab for all this joy you're going to see on these little ones' faces.
Yes, Vanessa, if you can view if you can show those pictures, and we can continue to kind of just discuss some of the other victories that we've had as she flips through those.
So there's yoga in the park, there's gardening, there's rain, they taught us about rain barrels. We have story time in the park with the Metropolitan Police Department. You see, we've all got our masks on. The US Park Police brought their horses into our parks. So we just had a wonderful way to be creative and figuring out and see all those beautiful trees, Jamoni and
Yes.
Queen. We've got these beautiful trees. We've got these beautiful trees that help to calm our spirits. We felt safe during that time, and our kids were allowed to be kids, knowing that this was a safe place for them to be. And we're just so grateful that we have access to our parks and to these young people, and to Ab and his vision to make sure, because Ab deals with the politicians, to make sure. And that's the other thing, the politicians need to pay more attention to our environmental justice issues. And I will end with this, Jamoni. When we look at climate change in the district, folks who live in disinvested communities are going to be impacted the greatest. And what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? Thank you. Thank you for showing my photos.
Thank you.
Yes, that was awesome, Sister Brenda, and brings to mind a project that we are also doing in Richmond, Virginia. Is we've created a labyrinth for those who are familiar, and this came about right around the time of we were in the pandemic, and then the George Floyd, very public murder of George Floyd. We were talking about trauma and how everyone was inside. So there was a grant offering, and we wrote it to create a labyrinth, a walk-in space so that people can get outdoors and heal and meditate and just have a place to be, out in nature. So I will invite you all to that. We look to have a grand opening dedication ceremony during World Labyrinth Day. And so I will be sending that out. but that is a place where children can be. You know, we're going to have
Yeah.
gardens for lead poison children, for children that are autistic, you know, some sensory stations where the children will be able to build some tranquility fountains, and just so that, you know, they can have a safe place to be, as well as our elders, you know. So for everyone in the community, there was not one in the city of Richmond proper, you know, as you talked about, you know, these distressed communities. So just to be able to give something like that back to the community, and us to have ownership of it is just, you know, it's a good feeling, and one of the many, you know, projects that we are working on. Like you for the children.
There are three things I'd like to point to. And by the way, I was remiss because I would have liked to have had some pictures about one of the things I'm going to talk about. But anyway, first I'd like to mention, you talk about a success was the cherry blossom trees. We have the largest allotment of legacy cherry blossom trees outside of the Tidal Basin because of a relationship we have with the National Cherry Blossom Festival. I want to thank them, the folks at the National Cherry Blossom Festival, for the support that they've given us over the years.
And the us is Friends of Oxon Run, correct?
Pardon?
And the us that you're speaking about is Friends of Oxon Run.
Oh, the Friends of Oxon. Yes. Yes. But I'm saying, you know, I had a chance to meet a young lady named Miss Barry, who was planting 3 trees at a school when, you know, for the 100th anniversary of the gift from Japan. And so I had a program in the school at that time. And so I said, oh, wait a minute, can y'all bring some trees down to Oxon Run? And so ultimately brought 250 trees down in Oxon Run Park. Some of them have been destroyed, but they've been replacing them, okay? But right now, oh God, if you could go down to one of the streets, Livingston Road, cherry blossom trees are blooming all over the place. So we are proud of that, and we're excited about that's a success. And that's something that creates an opportunity for people to come to Oxon Run Park. It's a destination in some respects at this time, but it also helps us to generate a base of support for the programs. Now, the next thing is the Mother's Peace Garden. That was created by a young lady who worked with Brenda down in Marion Barry's office, Jackie Ward. And to me, it represents a place because we have an activity there with the Mothers Against Gun Violence. And that's a place of solace and refuge, you know, and that's the place we want. I'm proud of it. I mean, you know, sometimes it's overgrown and what have you, but it's a place where we want people to be able to go to. Then the final thing was this year we had what is known as the Green Fair. And that was that. Oh God, I was so excited about that because we came up with the idea of thinking green, growing green as they do at the well. And we have a partnership with DC Greens and the well, and they've been supportive of us. And we hope that they're going to continue to support us in the way that they've supported us in the past because we need their assistance. But anyway, the Green Fair, we had the growing green, and then we had eating green. So we were able to show people, to educate folks about thinking green. That's the first thing. And we had agencies that dealt with that. And then we had people who were there growing, and then we had some food preparations for people to learn how. At the well, we wanted to show people that some of the vegetables and whatever that they were growing at the well, how to cook those and how to use them. So those are 3 things that we've done. We're excited about.
Yes, it is so great to hear about your successes and victories and what you've all been able to do for your own communities. And I'm excited to be able to work with you all in so many different capacities. I consider us going into another year of Ward 8 Water Watchers at the well at Oxon Run, a definite victory last year. Ab was able to serve as an ambassador and become an ambassador of the program. So we're excited to have him on the front lines and continue that work. So so much more to still be done as we continue. And I'm excited to see us progress and us grow in this work for sure. And I'm going to
other thing, can I make one other point though?
Absolutely.
When I'm talking about supporters is APAC.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. We love APAC.
Undoubtedly, yes. So we couldn't have done so much of what we did this year, and we'll be doing this. I mean, last year and what we'll be doing this year without their support. And by the way, it's a natural kind of relationship that we have. You know what I mean? It's not where you're bringing these disparate groups together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
I'm going to kind of combine these last two questions because I wanted to give thanks and honor you all at the end. But as we're running short on time, I wanted to know, what are some things that make you concerned about our future, and what are some things that make you hopeful about our future? And I'm going to leave that open.
Concerned about our future. Hopeful. Those are good questions, Jamoni.
Yeah. Anything
I
that is
can,
currently happening that that you still have certain concerns for as we move across? I know we're concerned overall about the climate crisis, but anything in particular as it relates to environmental justice, as it relates to the Black
yes,
community, that
yes.
you're concerned about, and what are you hopeful for?
Okay, the one I'm looking at is the expansion of the Southeast Tennis and Learning Center. And I don't know the rationale for this except that it's political. And the proponents of this expansion to green space, where they are going to put in some tennis courts and a parking lot on green space. The argument is that we want to bring some tournaments toward it. Well, that's what you have, the facility up on Kennedy Street in the Rock Creek Park, okay, for. The thing is, that's a challenge for us. The educational portion of the expansion, we're all in support of that. But when you're talking about green space being concreted over and used, you know, in a way that takes that away from us, that's a problem. What am I excited about is that we have allies, we have friends who are going to be with us. So one in particular is Casey Tree said, we'll be right there with you fighting this issue. And we're hoping to gain other support to, you know, people may think we're crazy, you know, you hear people talking about hugging trees. Well, now I know why they hug the trees. Isn't that right, Brenda? Forest bathing. Forest bathing. No. You know, people in our community, by the way, Jamoni, we've had people in our community who are opposed to the installation of trees, the planting of trees.
Yeah.
And yet and still, when they come in for tree bathing, they say, oh, this is a new experience for me. I like this. So anyway, that's our challenge right now. But we know that we're going to overcome it. We're going to be able to prevail. So that's what's exciting about the challenge that we're confronted with.
Absolutely.
Queen, do you mind if I go next?
Go ahead, sister, not at all.
I think for me, there's a couple of things. I wish there could be a moratorium on development in the District of Columbia. And I say that because why do you have to build when you can reuse what we already have? Because when I look at the future, we may have no green space by the time they finish building. So I think there should be a moratorium on building, on development. And then finally, we have something called memory forests in Oxon Run Park. And those memory forests were born out of the gun violence. We've had so many fallen heroes who have succumbed to gun violence, and mothers, they were all mothers who asked us to plant a tree in the name of their loved one. And I would like to see a day come when people appreciate trees because of the benefits of trees, and not that we're planting trees because folks in our community continue to succumb to gun violence. Because at the rate that we're going to have a huge memory forest in Ward 8. And I'm very concerned about that. And then I just want to say that I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because of people like you, Jamoni, and Ab, and Eliza, and Queen Shabazz. I'm just so hopeful that you guys will make sure that they get it right. So when my time comes, it's just good to know that there are other people, and the people in this audience will make sure that they get it right for us. So we don't want you to be afraid of Black people. We don't want you to judge Black people. We want you to acknowledge and recognize that we're human beings too, who deserve green space and not have to be subjected to environmental justice issues for the rest of our lives. Thanks, Jamoni. Queen?
Yes, very well said, sister. And what my concern is that we won't have a future if we don't do something about it. We don't acknowledge and recognize that we are in a climate crisis and that, time is running short. I'm hopeful because we have created a solar powered community resiliency hub in the distressed community of Petersburg, Virginia, that is controlled by the community. And also we have, now we have the power where we're working with Earth Justice and have filed a lawsuit against the EPA to make sure that they lower the lead levels, acceptable lead levels and acceptable levels of sources where children can become poisoned. So those things that we are able to do, that we take the ownership and not be afraid to do them. It's going to depend on us and passing it on to those to come behind us so that we will have a future. So there's always hope, but it lies with us ensuring that future for ourselves.
Jamoni, doesn't nature forward the change in focus, becoming nature forward, pretend a bright future for us as well? That's why we're so happy that we align ourselves with, quote, nature forward.
Well, we thank you so much for being here. We are so happy to be connected with all of you in the work that you do, in the communities that you impact. When I first started at Nature Forward, I think I was on the phone with up in Miss Brenda like 3 or 4 times a week. And it was just because I wanted to take in everything else that, I was coming, I'm 5 generations back in DC, but, I went to school in Prince George's County, a predominantly Black county, and it was just so exciting to be back with where my family is from. But I wanted to be able to do the work wholeheartedly. I wanted to connect with you all. I wanted to just be fed so much so that I could be able to then bring that back into the work that I do. So it's only been in a year and a half, but I am so excited to be able to continue to work with you all and to continue to work with you, and hopefully one day very, very soon that you all will just rest, because you have done more than enough. And we have so many other people that we're able to lean on and work with. We'll always come back, we'll always invite you, but at one point I will be excited, and I look forward to you all resting as our elders, as our, as the foundation, as pillars for the work that we do in the district. So I thank you so much for being here again. And I was just going to leave with this quote from one of my favorite authors, Bell Hooks. To build community requires vigilant awareness of the work that we must continually do to undermine all the socialization that leads us to behave in ways that perpetuate domination. So thank you all again. I love you all, and blessings.
Bye.
See you later.
Yes, thanks so much.
See you later.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.